Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Wray, for your service and your patience. In 2018, 10 leaders of Temple Beth Or, a synagogue in my district, received threats mailed to their homes. These threats led to the cancellation of programming and continued a disturbing trend of rising anti-Semitism in North Carolina. In the years since, my state has confronted new threats from domestic terrorists at minority institutions. This past April, a man was arrested on the campus of North Carolina A&T State University, the largest HBCU in the country, with multiple firearms and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, as well as a makeshift explosive, brass knuckles, crossbow, knives, and other weapons. Thankfully, this man was arrested before he could cause any harm, but the threat he posed to the campus mirrors threats we've seen to HBCUs around the country. In North Carolina and across the United States, we've also seen increased threats against reproductive care providers in the wake of the Dobbs decision last summer. And North Carolina recently enacted a 12-week abortion ban that has severely restricted access to reproductive health care in my state, and people often have to go through threatening crowds to be able to access the care that they need. While some in North Carolina have highlighted vandalism of crisis pregnancy centers since the overturn of Roe, they failed to acknowledge or respond to the increase in violence at abortion providers. Does the FBI currently provide anti-terrorism training to civilians, to HBCUs, places of worship, religious centers, individuals providing abortion services, LGBTQ groups, and does that training include a domestic terrorism component so that they can help you and law enforcement?
Well, we do a whole bunch of things to engage with the community, institutions that are targeted with violence, that include a number of the kinds of institutions you mentioned. I know in particular we work very, very closely with the Jewish community, which has the unfortunate distinction of, despite the percentage that they represent of the American population, of being way disproportionately targeted. So we spend a lot of time engaging with them around the country and nationally. We also spent a lot of time engaging with campus law enforcement, including at HBCUs. We spent a lot of time on that, especially last year with the bomb threats that were coming in. I was just recently with all of the campus law enforcement leaders from around the country just the last couple of weeks. And we certainly try to provide awareness to different kinds of institutions about how to deal with potential mass casualty events and things like that. We also provide information about things to be on the lookout for in people's communities. I should say, though, when you mention on the abortion side, reproductive facilities, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't also point out that there has been a pretty significant uptick in violence going the other way since the Dobbs decision. And in fact, most of the investigations that we've opened since the Dobbs decision, probably about 70% of them have been violence against pro-life facilities. We recently had a significant charge in the Madison, Wisconsin area of a guy who was trying to firebomb a pro-life facility there. So we're out there with communities across the spectrum.
Okay. And how would an investigation differ if it's domestic terrorism as opposed to just an ordinary criminal case?
Well, our investigation focuses on the violence first and foremost. I think there is no domestic terrorism statute. There's no offense of domestic terrorism, but we define domestic terrorism for purposes of opening an investigation as having three things: violence or threat of violence, in furtherance of an ideology. In other words, that's what's driving the violence in that particular instance, and in violation of federal criminal law. If we have those three things, enough evidence to indicate that that might be what's going on, then we would treat that as a domestic terrorism investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Lady yields back. We got votes, Director. We're going to do one more on our side, then we'll take a break and come back for the remaining members. The gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
Yes.